Ladies and gentlemen, SideStrafe here with Mechwarrior Online, and it has indeed been a while since I've taken a look at this title. I think when it released, I felt that it just wasn't polished or optimized enough, and my state of mind was like, look, you know, I really love Mechwarrior. I grew up with BattleTech and the original Mechwarrior games by Activision. They can't get this wrong, so I'm just going to step back, bide my time, and wait for this thing to be where it needs to be. And I can safely say that now it's a lot smoother. I think the gameplay mechanics are there. It's a fantastic free-to-play title, and I was shocked last night to learn during my live stream that a lot of people had no idea this game exists. I was absolutely floored. I'm like, are you serious? How does the name Mechwarrior somehow escape you? I mean, if you're into mecha for any reason, how do you not know about this? So, you know, Mechwarrior Online now has a few more gamers because of last night's live stream, and we'll perhaps have a few more after this video. But yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic free-to-play title. You have nothing to lose but time in checking it out. There's a lot that you can do for free. I highly suggest taking a look at it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not without its problems, but thankfully, really, the problems only have to do with aesthetics. So the gameplay, I'm going to say right off the bat to start this video out, is pretty solid. It's a simulation. It's not an arcade game. It's a simulation that has a learning curve, and that's a good thing to me. I like games with learning curves, as most of you have discovered by me playing War Thunder a lot lately. You know, you have to deal with your heat management, your weapon groupings, your different loadouts, the creations in the mech bay, you know, just trying to add the right engine and manage your tonnage, all that stuff. That's what Mechwarrior fanatics and BattleTech fans are always looking for. This game is nothing without the customization, which kind of leads me to my first complaint. The Mech Lab, as they call it, or the Mech Bay, I like saying Mech Bay, runs in a windowed mode. A 720p windowed mode. Now, apparently this was done on purpose. It's by design. The developers stated that we did this on purpose. We have no intentions of changing it. That was a forum post I read probably over a year ago. I think that that is a stubborn, closed-minded, selfish thing to do. And you might say, well, I like running in a windowed mode because of this. Well, great. Good for you. There should be a choice. You can run it windowed. You can run it full screen at native resolution. For example, I play all of my games at 1080p. I want my mech bay to be full screen at 1080p because I want to see these beautiful mech models in all their glory, and I want to be able to customize things, and I want the text to be crisp and clean. That's why I want full resolution with anti-aliasing. I'm not getting that. I thought by now that they would have fixed or added an option to go full screen at full res, but they haven't. And I'm just shocked by that. There's no excuse that you could give me that would make any amount of sense, because allowing for choice is something that any good developer knows is critical. So now, yes, you might be saying, well, SideStrafe, you can hit Alt-Enter in full screen the mech bay. I know that, but even if you do that, you're still running it at 720p. That's not what I want. And on top of that, when you come back from the battle, it then minimizes the window again. So you full screen it, Alt-Enter. Go into a battle, then it switches to 1080p for your gameplay, then you come back to the mech bay, and then it goes back to the window. Maybe there's a way to cut that off. Maybe there's a way to change it. Maybe there's a config file to fix this problem. I don't know. For one, I'll tell you right now, I don't think that I should have to mess around with config files to get my game the way I want it or the way it should be. So I don't really like those suggestions. You shouldn't have to do that. It's not what you do. That's not why you invest any money into these games. And you might be, well, it's a free-to-play. Well, you know, a lot of us have spent money on this title. I'll just say that, especially when they sold us on these Founders Packs and are trying to sell us on this Project Phoenix thing coming soon as well. But, okay, anyway, so there's that. The Mech Bay, the Mech Lab, whatever you want to call it, it runs in a windowed mode, and it's low resolution. I think it's silly, especially considering that the hardcore Battletech fans are spending more time in the Mech Bay than they are in the game. They'll tell you that. I've spoken to people. They're like, oh yeah, I love customizing my mech. I like putting the paint schemes on it and the decals and the camouflage, and I like managing my tonnage and the heat and adding heat sinks and switching out the engines and trying to find the best config. And that's what Mechwarrior is about. So if that's such a crucial component to a Mechwarrior game, then why would you give us a crappy Mech Bay? World of Tanks, full screen, full res. War Thunder, full screen, full res. Most of these Hawken, full screen, full res mech bays and mech labs, or whatever you want to call it. World of Tank garages, hangars for the planes in War Thunder. This is the only game I've seen that's minimized the place where you spend a whole lot of your time. I just don't get it. Doesn't make sense. So anyway, it seems like to me that some developer is being stubborn, close-minded, and lazy, and they've done it because that's the way they wanted to do it for themselves, and they really just haven't thought about caring about the fact that on the planet Earth there's this thing called individuality and opinions that we all have. So there's that. You know, I would hope that somebody would work on that, because I know it's a complaint. I know I'm not the only one having an issue with it. I was in the live stream and everybody else thought it was stupid too, and nobody could figure out why it really was. I've been digging through the forums to see if there's ever been a good answer, and there never has been. It's just, no, we did it this way on purpose, we're not changing it. Okay, you're a jerk, but whatever. I mean, because that the forum post that I read about a year ago came across as extremely unprofessional and just very rude, and I was kind of shocked by that and a little sad at the same time, because I love this franchise. So anyway, there's that. Is it manageable? Is that a game breaker? No. The game is still fantastic. I can deal with it. The other issue is that when it comes to making videos, it hurts my production value, because then I've got this window and then my desktop is in the background, and I don't like having the desktop in a gameplay vid. It just looks stupid. So and it's worse for people that are using software solutions to record, because if you know, by using Fraps or DX Story, when you're recording a 1080p resolution and then it switches to 720p window, in some cases, depending on the software, it either gives you a separate file or it just completely messes up the recording. I'm lucky enough to have a hardware capture card with the AverMedia Live Gamer Portable that will just record my set desktop 1080p and then record anything that happens and changes on the fly, so it doesn't really have that problem. But still, I don't really want my desktop in the background when I'm making a video. So really, at the end of the day, if I make Mechwarrior Online videos, are you going to see much of me in the Mech Bay? Probably not. And that's sad, because that's a major part of this game. So until I can figure out a workaround, a config file fix or something, as much as I don't think that I should have to deal with configs, I would do it if it could solve my problem. So I'm open to that. But until then, I don't think that I would ever show the Mech Bay in its current state, unless I can figure something out. So, you know, so there's that complaint. I think that was my major issue with the game, because that's such an important part to Mechwarrior. Okay, beyond that, it just comes down to the aesthetics. It's a beautiful game using CryEngine 3. The mech models have been redesigned, rebooted, if you will, re-imaged, to put more of a modernized spin on classic 1980s designs. I think Battletech was created in 1984. Fossa Corporation was created. And I'm not sure what designs they had back then, because there's of course old school classic mechs as well. The designs that you're seeing here, I'm not 100% of what year they're from, but they've been modernized. The sloping of the armor, the design of the cockpits, they're all a lot more streamlined and more believable. Like if we were to believe that these mechs existed, that we could imagine that this is more so what they might look like if we were to take versions of those old designs. So I love that they've done that. When I saw the concept art, I was very excited. Beautifully done. Kudos to the modelers and the concept artists that put these things together. and designers, of course, too. You know, the weapons, the explosions, the firing, the sound effects, those things in aesthetics, they're pretty good. My issue is the one issue that has always plagued mech games since the beginning of time, and it's scaling. What do I mean by scaling? Well, if you take a look at the positioning of the cockpit in relation to where the ground is, you almost don't feel like you're that high up. If you look at where the mech's head is, and then you were to zoom out and maybe use the third person to kind of feel how tall you're supposed to be, you don't feel that tall when you're in the cockpit. You almost feel like you could open up the cockpit, eject, or climb down, and the ground is just a few feet below you. It just seems like it's not done correctly. It's not scaled properly. The proportions are off from that viewpoint. Maybe it has to do with how the camera systems on the mech work. I don't know, or just how the cockpit. But from what I'm seeing in these videos, or from what I'm seeing when I just play, it just doesn't feel right. I want to feel like I'm in this multi-ton, several story tall weapon of mass destruction, and I don't always feel like that. And that also has to do with the scaling of the maps. The maps, I think, are the biggest issue. They're just not nice maps. They're very boring. It's usually like, here's a path, here's a hill or a mountain. Or maybe here's some buildings, here's another path. And it's just laid out in a way that's just not fun to play in, or balanced, or even, in some cases, realistic. They're just generic maps. There's nothing that says, oh, I love this map. This map's awesome. There's nothing that makes it memorable. A memorable map would be something where you could say, you could look back at an old game and be like, oh man, remember this map? Remember the Hacienda map from Rainbow Six? Oh, that map was awesome, you know? Like, you can kind of look back and say, oh yeah, that map was so well designed that I hope they remake it. Whereas with these maps, it's like, meh. It's almost like somebody took one of those paint programs. Or it's almost like, remember the old StarCraft or Warcraft map editors where you could just kind of like drag and drop rivers around and make walls and drag trees everywhere, and it was just really easy to make a map. I almost feel like that's what somebody did. Somebody just kind of like zoomed out and painted down, oh, I'm going to put a river here, here's a couple mountains, here's a couple trees, okay, that's a map. They're just boring, and they're small. And this is CryEngine 3. We know what it's capable of. We know that it can do better than this, but this is what we get. And the scaling, again, just the proportions just feel off. And some of the maps, you still end up with structures and things that dwarf your mech. You're always in these areas where you're just surrounded by things that are so much larger than you that you never feel like you're the biggest thing on the map. A lot of the trees, in some cases, you can tell by how the leaves and things are designed in the branches that, yes, you are much bigger than these trees. But a lot of the times the trees are still much taller than you, and of course there are some insanely tall trees even on planet Earth. But it's just, I want to once in a while feel like I'm the big thing on the map. That there's some weight and scale to this, you know, that there's something more to it. Because otherwise it's almost like if you remove the cockpit, gave me an M4 and just stuck me in there like a grunt, you know, a human being, a soldier, that this could just be some map that you would play in a normal first-person shooter, other than the fact that some of the trees are tiny. Or once in a while you maybe walk around somewhere where there's a small car or truck or vehicle or building. I mean, those are the only things that really make you feel large, is the fact that they have a couple of maps where there are smaller structures and cars on the ground. But even then, you can't destroy them. You can't step on them and watch them blow up. You can't run over trees. You don't feel like you're huge. You don't feel like you're this giant weapon. I mean, even we can look at World of Tanks. Horrible game engine, which they've managed to make do with. It actually looks good because their artists are talented. They know how to texture. They know how to just create levels with some sort of design and balance in mind. And there's some good maps, there's some bad maps, but generally they're not bad, and they've done a lot with a single core unoptimized engine. But at least even in that game, when you're in a tank, you can run over cars, you can run over fences and certain houses, not all of them, but some of them. You can run over all the trees, you know, because why? They said, we're in a tank, why couldn't you run over those things? Well, you're in a mech. We're in this Hunchback here, a 50-ton beast that should be able to stomp over these. How is that not a priority when you're talking about design and aesthetics for a mech game? Why can't I run over the trees and smash things, step on a car and watch it explode? You know, why when my mech falls onto a tree or falls onto a building or falls, like that there's not a crater left behind, that there's not dust and debris kicking up around the mech as it hits the ground? You know, I'm just saying, I mean, when I think about mechs fighting each other, that's kind of what I'm picturing. And while there's some great particle effects here, there's just no destruction. There's no destructible terrain or environments, and I think that that's kind of sad. I mean, Battlefield has far more destruction with their Frostbite engine, which, let's face it, that's one of the best game engines out there, bar none. It's just unfortunate that, you know, if you don't work for EA, you're not going to have access to it. If you're not part of their, you know, empire, that there's no touching that game engine. Otherwise, could you imagine this with Frostbite, where you could destroy pretty much everything? That would be fantastic. But I mean, this is CryEngine. If we've played, you know, if you've seen even the original Crysis, which of course was a different version of the engine, you know, that game in single player at least was well known for being able to knock down a lot of the environments. And again, don't even tell me it's about performance, because if World of Tanks is doing it on a horribly optimized engine, then I know this engine is capable of it. And that's why options exist on the PC. If something's not running at full frame rate, you have the option to turn down your settings. So, you know, these maps are so small that I just don't see an excuse for why they can't do it. And on top of that, you always just feel like you're boxed in. You're always just in these worlds that just aren't a joy to be in. Like, I feel like I'm trapped. I feel like I can't get out of here ever. And so, you know, I have a problem with that. Okay, well, I think, you know, that's some of my biggest complaints. It's just, I want to feel more like I'm in the mech. I think one thing that I could add into as well is just the overall destruction. They seem to have gone with some sort of ragdoll physics for the mechs, which is it's kind of cheesy in some cases. You know, they just kind of flop over, and you're just not feeling the weight. And one thing I thought of the other day is like, wait a minute, you know, these things have reactors. Okay, what happens when a mech's reactor explodes? If it manages to happen, of course they're shielded, and usually it's maybe it's the last thing to happen, depending on how damaged it gets. But we've seen CGI videos, we've seen comic art, we've seen what happens when a mech's reactor explodes. It's like a little nuclear explosion. Why doesn't that ever happen in this game? Why isn't there a giant white flash of light that just goes all over the screen? Picture it. Just boom, just whoosh, the whole screen goes white. There's like this shock wave, and then the aftermath is maybe this little small mushroom cloud coming from where the mech once was in this giant crater. Why isn't that in here? That should be a no-brainer. And imagine anything next to the mech is severely damaged or destroyed in the process. Maybe if you were like next to a guy that goes critical, your arm gets blown off. And maybe there should be a warning too, like your computer will be like, you know, critical reactor detected within the vicinity or something like that, and it detects that there's about to be a nuke, so you have some time to get away, at least to kind of just balance it out gameplay wise. It's like, okay, there's, you know, it's detected a reactor going critical. It's like, get out of here. You just like bail as fast as you can, and if you're too slow, oh well, you're gonna get caught in the blast. Maybe you're gonna get damaged. You're gonna lose some armor. I mean, those are the things that I think that's what elevates a game. Those are the little things that start to separate you from other titles. And when you're dealing with this genre, this franchise, where we know that those things have happened, then why not? Let's do it. I mean, this engine is capable of rendering beautiful effects, particle effects, and explosions. I mean, I don't see why they haven't done it yet, or if maybe they just haven't thought of it. And, you know, just falling down in general, you know, it should be more of an event. Like, okay, you got hit to the point where you're down on the ground. Maybe somehow, you know, a friendly could come by with a tow hook and try to pull you up. I mean, there's all these little ideas that you could throw into it. Because in this game, legging or hitting or destroying the leg of a mech, what does it do actually? Because I don't think it does what it used to do in the original Mechwarrior games. In the original Mechwarrior games, if you blew somebody's leg off, their mech would fall, it would hit the ground, and they would still be there. Like, they would still be moving around because they still had control of the mech. They wouldn't just explode if the legs were gone. They would be moving around. You would see the torso kind of twisting. Imagine if it was almost like Left 4 Dead in a way, where you get knocked down, your leg is out, but if your mech has arms with guns on it, that you would see this arm come up, and you would actually see it go across in front of the cockpit, and maybe you could still shoot at the enemy if your mech perhaps landed in a way that it had the ability to kind of prop itself up somehow. Maybe you could prop yourself up with one arm. I know I'm getting crazy here, but screw you guys. It's 2013. Why aren't we seeing this crap? I'm serious. This would be so, man, you're propping yourself up with your one arm, and you got your other one out, and you're shooting at things, and maybe your fellow mechs come by, they shoot out this grapple or tow hook, and they got this like winch system, and it's trying to pull you back up. Man, that's what I'm talking about. You can have like recovery operations. There's no reason that this stuff can't exist. It takes time, but do it, because you know what? It's amazing. It's a fantastic idea, and I've just given it to you for free. It's all about innovation. If you keep making the same old things over and over again, you're never going to get anywhere. And the fact that they've already decided to make a hardcore Mechwarrior game again, that's a great step. But keep going. Don't stop. Keep adding to the game. You know, if you're going to call yourself beta for who knows how long, then use that as an excuse to continue to add new features and break them in. We're here to test it for you. You know, there's plenty of people throwing money at you. Do it, because new mechs, you can only go so far with that. One day you'll run out of mech designs unless you create your own from scratch. And then what are you going to sell? So, you know, premium time, people are going to make money off of premium time, fine, whatever. What else are you going to offer? That's not going to cut it forever. You have to innovate. And I think that's not just for this game, but that's a message to any game developer. You know? If you don't have an imagination, what are you doing in the business? So, I think that's why at one point I wanted to be a game developer, because I wanted to be the guy that had the ideas, and it just never really panned out. So now I just complain a lot. And again, please don't see this as a form of negativity, because I really enjoy playing this game. It's a lot of fun. I had fun playing it on the live stream, and I'm sure it'd be a lot more fun even with friends. So, you know, I think that concludes this look at Mechwarrior Online. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. As always, I will definitely see you on the next one.